Hello, hello, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Safety Brief. Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic that's been making waves in the tech world, which is deep learning versus machine learning. Of course, we have Matt and Mike to join us today to share their insights and shed some light on the differences between these two powerful concepts. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for everyone joining us. That is extra patient. We ran into some really good and wholesome security controls that were newly introduced and navigated them, and here we are. We are live.
Alrighty, so let's get started. My first question is, what is the fundamental difference between machine learning and deep learning, and how do they fit into the realm of cybersecurity?
Yeah, so the differences primarily between machine learning and deep learning, really what that's going to unpack is um, well, let's think about it. So we have machine learning that is largely signature based, where you have signatures that exist in the form of like a database of signatures, like known good, known bad, and what that essentially is going to produce in like antivirus applications or even like machine learning in normal implications is going to be more of a known good, known bad form of security. And so known good, known bad for machine learning is certainly better, but not as good, right? And that's where we're going to really encounter the difference between both machine learning and deep learning as we unpack it. Matt, if you have any insights on this specific to the differences between machine learning and deep learning, I know you have a long tenured history in this area and could put me to shame, candidly. So want to kind of give you the floor to speak to, what do these mean? Obviously, both are subsets of AI, but help us unpack it maybe from a layman's perspective of what do
Okay.
these big fancy words mean?
Well, I need to change my light over to evil then. Hold on. There we go.
There you
Now
go.
we're going to
Evil
get
light.
into the evil light because this is where things get fun. Now I'll really go back to normal. So machine learning, if you look at it, let's start off by kind of breaking this down. You have machine learning, you have deep learning. Both fall under the realm of artificial intelligence. They are both artificial intelligence. It's just one is only intelligent. The other is kind of programmed constraints, shall we say. Um, so if we were looking at data from a machine learning perspective, machine learning is going to have a set start and endpoint that you are looking at for the data set. It's going to be looking at specific objects within that data set to help say yes or no. Does data fit in the parameter? Yes, in box. Does data fit? No, outside of box. The best way of looking at machine learning would be hop on. I don't remember which streaming service it is, and we're not promoting them on here. So find which streaming service and watch the Mitchells versus the Machines. In that movie, they did possibly the most layman's based description of machine learning that I have ever seen. It basically allowed them to have a dog that was confused as a loaf of bread. It could not make the determination on whether it was a dog or a loaf of bread, and it short circuited and just allowed everything through. So that's what you're looking at when it comes to machine learning. There are programmed constraints between point A and point B that you're looking at. Also, you're not looking at all of the data, you're looking at certain parts of the data. So when you look at something like deep learning doesn't require you to have, programmed facets of the information. You can data dump into deep learning and it will look at everything. And then it can start learning and making its connections. So that's kind of the difference of what you're looking at there.
I appreciate you unpacking that, Matt. Now, Elizabeth, this is you have a unique perspective you bring to this as someone who's gone through formal education very recently on the matter of like the boot camps you've been through and starting within like higher education. So I'm curious from an academic standpoint, where are these topics coming up in the classroom, or have they come up in the classroom? And where have there been applications or maybe like practical examples given that you've seen of either machine learning or deep learning that viewers watching may have seen or see on a daily basis? We just don't maybe realize it.
That's a really good question. I think like the most relatable thing I hear about while being in college is the talk of AI and how they're writing papers and how they're doing projects for students. So having the issues with people not turning in their own work and doing their own assignments has been really big. So I think there's actually been a make of new tools on how to detect those types of assignments and that type of work that's being done. So there's different things on like Turnitin. So it's kind of actually engaging even growth in those types of sectors as well.
Yeah, no, there's certainly a lot of practical implications when it comes to both deep learning and machine learning, but even just AI. And that's why I think AI has captured really uh, so many, so much attention. Whether it's the civilian and private sector or even the business vertical. It is curious. A lot of people have a lot of interest, and I think where we're kind of walking into the past 12 months, it's much more accessible. And I spoke about this yesterday down in Dallas, and specifically the accessibility of AI. It is far easier to access by anybody ever before than it ever has been. And I think AI is not new; it's been around for a long time. And it's funny because even stoplights are some form of AI, right? What are they doing? They are eliminating the need for a traffic cop to be out there and tell who to go where. But what is the logic given to these AI, forms of technology? Well, there's a pressure plate under each lane. There's an algorithm that says if you detect a car of a certain weight and there's that many cars, let that lane go. Right. And so, that's a really, really real time practical example of what is machine learning. Well, it's a defined left and right lateral limit of what it's supposed to do when something happens. And I think machine learning excels in predictable environments. And so just like stoplights, like traffic isn't going to drastically change. It's fairly static. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong if this is a bad example, but
Nope.
traffic is an unchanging constant. And I think that's where AI excels in unchanging constants, right? So if it's a fairly routine task, another great example of this. What is machine learning? Machine learning is the walk up to the kiosk at a restaurant or a fast food joint and use the touchscreen to order. Why? Because there is a limited set of outputs or results that you can reach, and that's called your menu, right? And so the user walks up, they select these options, and they say, I want the burger, no mayo, extra barbecue sauce, fries, et cetera, right? Do you want to add a drink? If so, then yes. If not, then no. And that's machine learning, right? It's a very specified but limited, in a way, algorithm. Now certainly, can you have large machine learning data sets? Yes, absolutely. You can have a large menu, but the point is that machine learning is limited in its left and right lateral limit. It has to be trained explicitly on the situations and potential scenarios it may see in order for it to navigate that. In Matt's example, in the trained or untrained dog, navigation. This is why we see Tesla adopting deep learning. Why is that? Because there are so many diverse variables that you can't calculate everything while driving a car. There could be a deer that comes across the road on the highway, right? And then they're like, well, the rate of deers crossing the highway is low, so I'm not going to train my machine learning model for that. Well, guess what? You're going to hit every deer on the highway because it's not trained for that experience or that model, right? And
Using
so
the
that's where,
Tesla as an example, I
yeah,
mean, so if you look at it, the baseline amount of data that you would have would require sample sets from different drivers. Every driver is going to drive completely differently.
yeah,
I mean, come on. In Texas, every driver does the most insane thing that you can possibly expect them to do every 3 minutes on the road.
yep,
So there's no way that you can anticipate that. But when you're looking at the smart driving system and say the autopilot system for a
mm,
Tesla, and what they're actually using for that level of learning. That's going through and making calculations on the fly, looking at what's next to me on the left, what's on the right, what's behind me, how fast am I going, how close is the object in front of me, what are my, what
Yeah.
trajectory would I be able to take in case of an emergency? If I have to brake, how hard do I apply the brakes automatically? It's going through and doing all those
Weather.
calculations. Exactly. Factoring
Yeah.
in friction on the road if it's raining
Yeah.
versus if it's sunny outside, versus if there's a tornado that's blowing you around. I mean, you never know. It's
Yeah.
Texas,
That's when you
uh,
stop driving. Yeah.
pretty much. But it's doing all of these calculations on the
Yeah.
fly, maintaining all of that data. Machine learning can't do that because you're going to have a set database or data bank that you're looking at. The input that you're providing is going to give the output. If one variable is not in the set that you are working with, it's not going to take an action.
Mm.
So they program everything and say, okay, well, the speed limits on these roads are 70, but we're going to put in a tolerance and say anything up to 73 miles an hour, we take an action. And then you get anybody again in Texas that is currently driving 85 because the speed limit doesn't apply down here. It's going to ignore that. When an action should be taken, it's going to see the speed limit or the speed the car is going as 85. It's not going to know what to do because it's not within its programmed constraints.
Yeah. And I think, Elizabeth kind of introducing the question of, what are the differences? I think it's the applications and how efficient it works in those applications. So continuing the car example, what is a fairly static environment where a car is driven? Well, a racetrack. Right there's no crosswalks, there's no crossing guards, there's no deers crossing the highway at most racetracks. Maybe
I was
some
going to
dirt
say, you're
tracks will be
obviously not
different.
talking about the Nürburgring.
I'm thinking Daytona, okay? Daytona, Florida, we'll say the Speedway or the Autobahn or whatever it is. Some defined closed loop vacuum sealed environment that is very limited, very constricted. That's where machine learning can excel. Now,
Mhm.
here's where we are. We're all in cybersecurity. What is the environment we work in? It is not closed. It is not vacuum sealed. It is not static. It is not predictable. Right?
Ours is
It
the
is the
equivalence of the Monaco GP. We basically just closed down
right.
some streets and said, "Here, have fun."
It is the furthest thing from that, right? And so, it's like taking Formula One cars through downtown Chicago, right? It's a very different application, okay? And so, specific to the uses that we've seen, and why, a lot of our partners come to us and say, well, why do you standardize on a deep learning platform? Right? Why do you choose to standardize on that? And it's specifically because of the efficiency and efficacy it has when applied to cybersecurity, because for our uses, obviously for security, we need that level of ability to develop those patterns with large data sets and large unknown variables. And that's where deep learning excels. That's why we have examples of outdated deep learning agents that haven't gotten an update in 6, 12, 18 months can still prevent 0-day threats or malware that hit disk or try to hit disk. Because why? Because it is trained in a way that it can adapt to unknown variables, right? And that is probably the coolest. That's the coolest, or maybe scariest. It depends on who you ask. The thing about deep learning, but again, going back to the Tesla self-driving analogy, right? You have a 3-year-old running across the street for his ball, or a dog that's only 15 or 20 pounds. Maybe they didn't include a 10-pound dog. Maybe it's only everything over 11 pounds, right? Because anything over that's a child, right? Like there's all these algorithms, right? But because it's leveraging deep learning, it can adapt to these situations, even if it's never seen it before. And that's where we get tangible, like 0-day protection, because the fall down or the gap that machine learning may have, because again, we go back to it just to rehash it and make it ingestible, is that machine learning is limited to how it was taught. It had to be taught very explicitly. If you see a blue dog or a red dog, then do this. Okay. Well, what if and then that child's like, okay, great. I learned by machine learning. I don't even know what to do if I see a white dog. I don't even know if it's a dog, right? Why? Because it's never been trained. Now, us as humans, we learn through deep learning in the same way. That's how our brains evolve, and that's how our brains develop. And so that's why my daughter, who's 5, or my 2-year-old, can look at a dog, and what does she know? Well, it has to be furry, covered in hair, 4 legs, elongated snout, tail coming out the back of it, right? And it's walking on all 4s. Those are characteristics. She doesn't need to see every dog. She doesn't need to be trained on every single breed of dog to call it a dog. Now,
Mhm.
is it imperfect? No, it's not. But that's why we have the lowest false positive rate out of any other platform. Because to some people, from a distance, you see a big cat and a small dog, those look pretty similar, right? Because the attributes are similar. But again, that's the leverage of deep learning, that we can identify things even if we've never seen them before, as well as it is far more versatile to unknown variables. And in cybersecurity, there couldn't be an industry that is more prone to be thrown at unknown variables.
Well, speaking of the unknown variables, I appreciate you both breaking that down for us. Let's dive into something that's a little bit more relatable. How do these differences play a role in the cybersecurity tools, such as the tools that Blockworks uses, made and Scud products? Um,
Yeah, Matt, you want to unpack Made, and I can give a shot at Scud?
Sure. So for MAID, we are basically going for your endpoint defense. The endpoint defense is going to be prevented by or protected by Deep Instinct. So the entire premise behind that is it is a prevention first solution. Mike likes to talk about left of boom, right of boom. I just like the boom. So, it
Mm,
kind of makes things a little bit interesting. I don't
indeed.
care where it blows up. I just want it to blow up somewhere. Um,
Anywhere but here.
yeah, anywhere but here. That's preferable. So deep instinct would be what we consider left of boom. It's before it gets in your environment. It's before it has the capability to do all kinds of crazy, nasty stuff. It is what you want out of a product. It is prevention based. So how exactly does deep learning differ when it comes to cybersecurity in our products versus something else that may be out there? Well, let's take a look at some of the threats that are out in the landscape. Specifically, let's look at ransomware. Ransomware is absolutely insane. Uh, Very quickly, you can spin up a new version of the ransomware that's being used, and because it has a different hash value, a lot of times it'll slip right through the prevention. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how's that possible? Our solution says that it uses AI. You're right, it uses AI, but it's kind of like the door greeter of AI. It's not the one that's actually doing all of the heavy lifting. It's the one that basically has, well, let's put it this way. It's a petty functionary that has a checklist.
Mm,
If you're not on the list, in this case, it's not going to stop you.
mm,
It's going to let you just walk right on in and have fun in the house. That's not what you want. So you have other solutions that have deep learning built into them, which is absolutely amazing. So an example that we can talk about with that is kind of what we did with our demo yesterday.
mm,
We have we have a malicious, not a malicious file. It is a file that is basically a data wiper. Said data wiper is signed by a legitimate signature by a vendor, not the vendor that released the wiper, obviously, because this thing just goes in and nukes everything. There's no vendor that would willingly release something like that. That would be crazy. However, because it's signed by a valid file, it can get through a lot, basically all of the solutions that are out there. Right now, there are two obscure solutions that detect it, but do not stop it. They will let you know, hey, this is in your environment, your stuff is going away, but they will not prevent it from getting through. Deep Instinct, however, full on prevents it. Cannot even get this thing on the machine, doesn't give it a chance to even do what it would want to do because it understands what the actual file is doing. And it's not just looking at, oh, you're signed by somebody I know. Come on in. So that's kind of the difference you're running into. Base level AI and machine learning does not have that kind of intuitive thought behind it. It doesn't have those actions. Deep learning, because it continues to learn, grow, and you let the brain sit out there for a while, and say you have a ton of different customers. You let it gather all of that data from what it's doing, all the files it's scanning, all the actions it's seeing. You take all of that data and you throw all of it, legitimately just throw every bit of it into the new model and train the brain on that model. You don't have to worry about programming, point A, point B. Oh, it's got to be between A and D for this and A and F for that. No, you just throw everything at it and say, learn. There you go. It finds what it needs to. It starts building and making the correlations. And that's how, when new versions of ransomware come out or new nasties come out that have never been seen before, deep learning has the capability to actually prevent them. So you don't have to worry about getting into your environment and waiting on a detection to come up so that you can try to take action quickly before you're, in a situation that you really don't want to be in. Like we showed yesterday. When you're having
That's
a really
right.
bad day, you can have a really bad day.
That's right. Yeah, and I think specific to what highlighted Matt's presentation yesterday was the level of unknown variables, right? There was a lot of things that were custom built for that. And not even the unknown variables if it would run or not, but more so the how uniquely crafted it was, right? This was not a known payload we took and reused. Matt, you were very intentional about the amount of effort that went in to make it one of a kind. And that specifically type of attack does not form well under a machine learning model that's responsible for defending it. So let's pivot it. We'll talk about our email solution, which is specifically Scud, which leverages machine learning, which a lot of people will hear and be like, oh no, it's less powerful. And it's specifically because, again, think about the email experience for users, right? Every email is going to have text. Every email is going to have an attachment. Every email is going to have links. Every email is going to have an origin or where that email is coming from. So the beauty about email is there's some fairly predictable avenues as long as you categorize those out and you create a machine learning model for each one of those, in which our product exactly has done that. And so if you look at an example of an event that have come through, there's the AI text analysis, right? What is the semantics of the actual text or the message coming through, right? That's one scanning engine, right? You got another one that looks at where that email physically, geographically traversed through. Did it come from Europe and then Asia and then back to the United States and then back out and go to Australia? That is all relevant, but that has its own model. The other piece is the attachments. What files are actually being attached to that email? Is it an HTML, a PDF, an EXE, a docx file, whatever it is, right? So then there's a whole machine learning model for documents, what is good, what is bad. And then specifically also looking at things like the links and the domain reputation, and what is the URL that's being sent, or where is that user being sent? What URL is it being sent to? What is the domain length of age? Is it newly registered with low traffic, or is it been registered for quite a long time with low traffic, or is it long-standing domain with high traffic? Google.com. It's not new and it's got a ton of traffic.
So you're telling me that our solution has the ability to find like shelf domains, things that were registered long ago and just not used, so that somebody can pick it up later and make it look like it was a credible object for a long time?
Yeah, I've specifically seen events prevented of domain was like 8,000 days old, but low traffic. So yeah, and so 8,000 days is, I don't even know if I've been alive for 8,000 days. That's a lot of days. But we'll see when I come back and do the math. Matt's already looking at the math.
I'm already looking at the math.
There it is. How many years is 8,000 days?
22. So Mike, if you're at least 22, we're gonna have to have a conversation.
I've been around like 16,000 days. Yeah, I've been around a lot longer than that. So okay, so point aside, we can indeed scan on domain reputation, but again, that having its own model. Why? Because it's a fairly static good bad. What is good, what is bad, right? We want high traffic, high age in that domain, you know. And so it doesn't mean every website stood up yesterday is bad, but again, the cool thing about this is every single one of these silos, if you will, so we have text analysis, we have geographic SMTP tracking, we have link sandboxing, we have attachment sandboxing, we have all of these things, domain reputation, sender relationship, you know. So like Matt and I emailing each other, Matt's email is fairly new for @blockworks.com, but everything else scores well because it matches, you know, and that's where that's really the intelligence is added there, because each of those is weighted, and weights are a very common fabric of AI in algorithms, right? The weights of how each thing is considered to, you know, ultimately contribute to the formula of good, bad, and different, right? What action is taken is where we see a lot of intelligence added to our email solution. Because yes, it is machine learning based, but specifically because it breaks out an algorithm for each one of those vectors that we find commonly in an email. You know, it's one thing to go bowling, it's another thing to go bowling with bumpers, right? There's a lot less variables, you know. And so that's what makes email a little bit easier to traverse with a machine learning model, because there are more static, predictable outcomes, right? There's account personation, there's credential harvesting, there's just straight spam. You know, do you want to sign up for this promo? No, I don't want to sign up for this promo, right? It's the 18,000th promo I've been invited to this year. And
So everybody listening, are you noticing a trend here about machine learning being basically on the side of predictability?
predictability.
That's what's great about machine learning. It is designed for predictability, but you're in cybersecurity.
Right.
Predictability goes out the door the second you walk in the door. That's honestly, that's why most of us got into cyber in the first place, is because you never have a day that is going to be the same. No matter what you do, something weird is going to happen that day, and you're just going to have to roll with it. And that's where deep learning comes in. When you have something that is just completely out of the ordinary, unheard of, unseen, unknown, it still is able to pick that up because it doesn't rely on predictability.
Right. Yeah.
I definitely think. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a really good way to really summarize what we've talked about. The primary differences between deep learning and machine learning being one is very good for static, predictable outcomes. You know, so for if this user is sending an email, but that email doesn't match the reply to, that's bad, right? So that's a really easy algorithm to say, why is the reply to in the email from different? Bad, you know, and that would weight a 2 or a 5 or whatever it is. So, but deep learning has a much more on disk, in processes, in PowerShell monitoring capability to say any process that is run, you know, like anything you open up command line and execute that's a blank check. You could see anything there.
Yeah, I definitely think each approach is still heavily utilized in the realm of cybersecurity and very useful in its own way. My final question is, as technology advances, do you see deep learning potentially overshadowing the traditional machine learning, or do you believe both will continue to grow and coexist in the realm of cybersecurity?
So in the realm of cybersecurity, I think we've obviously heard the benefits of deep learning, but I think I truly think consumer, like typical consumption, will drive business initiative. You know, so like for example, I go back to the fast food analogy of I walk into Chop House in Texas, which is incredible. It's great. It's very good, and they have a kiosk that you walk up to. That restaurant only has a certain set of menu items, right? And a certain set of things that you can modify or not modify. And the fun part about this is anybody that's watching this that has gone to DoorDash and placed an order for food, you have experienced machine learning, right? You have gone through the process of selecting your entree, your side, your drink, your meal. If you're Matt or I, the dessert, you know, and selecting that, and then you get the outcome. What is it? Well, that order is packaged, placed, and given to a courier that brings it to you. That's a very predictable life cycle, right? And I think specific to cybersecurity, we're going to have AI that's smarter than other AI, and that's where deep learning really sets itself apart, because
You're talking
it doesn't.
adversarial AI.
Right. Yeah. So we need something such as deep learning to fight potential attacks leveraging machine learning, you know. And so
we're already having to do that. That battlefield is already here. So now it comes down to, where does everything fall into place? Machine learning has its place, deep learning has its place, but when it comes to the more advanced, deep learning is really going to be where we're going to start seeing everything come together.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank you both for your insightful answers. It's clear that both deep learning and machine learning are important to the world of AI and cyber, each offering its own unique solutions to a variety of challenges. That wraps up another informative episode of the Safety Brief. A big thank you both for the conversation and for shedding light on the differences between deep learning and machine learning. As always, remember to stay curious, stay frosty, and thank you for watching.